of February 2026. I am Councillor Jeff Jones and I will be chairing today's meeting. Just to make you all aware, this meeting will be recorded. Can I welcome any members of the public and press to today's meeting? Can I kindly ask you to observe the meeting only and not speak or participate unless you are permitted to do so? Please ensure that phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. I wish to remind members signing in remotely of their legal obligation to have their cameras switched on during the meeting, please, in order to be seen and heard while participating in council business. If you wish to speak or ask a question, please raise your electronic hand on Teams or physical hand if in person. Should you wish to ask any questions of any of the attendees here today, please ensure these come through me as the chair. I will now move on to agenda item 1, Chair's announcements. Item number 6, application P2025-0622, land at PSC Way, Neath, has been withdrawn from consideration at today's meeting at the request of the applicants. We are not due to have a fire drill, so should the fire alarm sound during the meeting, please make your way to the nearest exit. Agenda item 2, declarations of interests. Are there any declarations of interest?
I see no declarations, Chair.
Thanks, Nadine. Agenda item 3. The minutes from the meeting held on the 20th of January are attached on pages 5 to 8 of the agenda pack for approval. Members, do you have any comments to make on the accuracy of these minutes? Please can I have a proposer and a seconder to approve the minutes?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any abstentions? No. If you do not raise your hand to the contrary, I will assume you are in favour of approving the minutes.
I see no indication to the contrary, Chair, and confirm that minutes have been approved.
Thank you. Agenda item 4 is a request for site visits. Are there any members who wish to suggest a site visit on the application presented today or for any other matter? So please let me know if you wish to call for a site visit at any point in the meeting. Now we move on to matters of board decision. Application P2025-0273, changes of use at Racky Grove Farm, Neath, Pontardawe. I would now like to ask the planning officer to take us through the report. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is planning application P2025-0273, change of use of an existing domestic outbuilding to allow for a mixed use comprising uses ancillary to the residential occupation of the house dwelling and a holistic therapy centre and associated works, including the widening of part of the existing access track, landscaping and parking spaces, together with mitigation measures, replanting scheme for felled trees. At a property known as Racky Grove Farm, Cumlantroyd Road, Neath, Pontardawe. So this plan that you see in the presentation identifies the application site. You see the application site includes the area edged red, and then the area is edged blue, and land within the applicant's ownership and control. You note that they have access along the lane but don't own the lane itself, and you can see the wider property joining in the application site currently within the applicant's ownership. So here's an aerial photo that identifies the location of the site and the adjoining properties. The lane access lane runs along that boundary that's got the trees located on it, and you can see the existing residential properties within the area. The following plan gives you an indication of settlement limits. So the yellow is the settlement limits as defined within your local development plan. So that is the existing settlement limit. The green area is what's considered to be open countryside, and in this case, the green wedge allocation and the policy EN3. So here is the existing building. You will note from the planning history and the report that an application was submitted and approved for this building as an outbuilding for uses associated with a dwelling house only and for non-commercial use. And this is the existing frontage of property showing the existing access, driveway and existing car parking area. This plan here, as you note from the report, works were undertaken in terms of some clearance of the site, including the felling of trees. You will note the comments in the report regarding the tree felling and planting and the issues regarding tree preservation all within that area. You will note that the applicant proposes to, as part of this application, submit a detailed scheme for tree replacement planting on a 4:1 basis. So this is the indicative plan showing the replacement planting, noting that we've got conditions on the application requiring a detailed scheme to be submitted, and then the tree planting undertaken within the next 12 months of the growing season. Again, this is an image of the existing access lane. So you've got the main road there in the foreground, one of the adjoining properties to the access lane which runs up parallel to the side elevation of that property. That lane leads up to the access point that I showed you in the previous photos, so within this property. So in terms of our recommendation, you will note that we've got conditions in relation to this application that restrict it to a temporary use for a 2-year period, and also conditions that restrict the number of classes, the number of members of the public that can attend those classes, and replacement car parking and the hours of operation. You will note the applicant's request on page 12 of the report, and our suggested compromise on page 26, which are then reiterated within the plan conditions. So we're recommending approval of the application today, subject to the conditions as set out within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Is the local ward member, Councillor Woodford, everything straight?
Yes, thank you, Chair, if I may. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Planning Committee for allowing me here today, and also thank the Planning Department for their cooperation over the past few months. We've had many discussions about this. This plan proposal P2025/0273, as Mr. Davis said, Ettrick Off Farm Roast, is planning for a change of use of an existing structure. I do believe that it's within adopted planning policy and is going for approval, and that there are no objections from the internal consultees. The change of use is for an holistic therapy business. Whilst not being unique, it is quite bespoke. There is only one other I can find in the Neath Talbot area, and that's in Coombs Road in Skewing. I feel that the temporary planning permission is a good condition, which will allow the authority to monitor any impact over the next 2 years and act as a safety net. The conditions that are being sought to be amended are the class sizes and the Monday to Saturday start time. The class size condition is set at 12. An amendment to 20 is being sought. The existing building capacity is 20 plus, and the manner of the classes have no audible or visual impact on the community. 12 persons per class will also negatively impact on the viability of the business because of the reduced numbers, and thereby financially will affect it. The Monday to Saturday start time condition is 8:30 a.m. start. Due to the type of activity, i.e. yoga, Pilates, sound therapy and grief counselling, many people need to partake before they go to their work in the morning. And therefore, an amendment of that condition to 6:30 a.m. is sought. This condition will also negatively impact on the viability of the business if it cannot be run in that way. The NP TCBC or also the council's corporate regeneration strategy shows that we have 3,900 businesses in the authority area, big and small, and that as an authority and as members, she would support and encourage those businesses. And I feel that these amendments will both support and encourage this business. Also, one of the council's main objectives is to progress wellbeing and health. And this is exactly the type of facility that can contribute to that with the type of therapy that goes on there. I have had contact with both the applicants and also an objector from the area. And living in the area, I don't feel that these amendments will impact on the community to any negative effect. And as I said before, the 2-year temporary planning will give a safety net and an opportunity for us as an authority to monitor what goes on and then amend it in the future if needed. So I'd like to thank the committee for listening to me today.
Thank you, Councillor Woodford. We'll now take questions from members of the committee. Members, do you have any questions for the officers?
Yes, please, Chair.
Councillor Bowen?
Right. It's on page 12. A little bit confused on this. You're saying 5 classes, or they're saying 5 classes per week. Is that 5 classes of each of yoga, therapy, and well-being? You've also got there maximum class size of 16. Minimum class duration of 90 minutes and opening hours 6:30 to 2:30 to 20:30. So I'm a little bit confused on that. If we're going to allow 20 cars with 1 person per car, that means there's 20 people going into that class, which is breaking what they're actually saying is the maximum class size of 16.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That information is obviously what the applicants provided to us in terms of 5 class sizes per week. The condition would restrict it to a maximum of 5 classes. There's no indication of what type of classes those would be.
Right, I am really a little bit confused on that. So it's 5
it would be a maximum of 5 classes per week within. So this information on page 12 is taken from what the applicant has submitted to us.
Okay.
So the 5 classes per week would be the maximum number of classes that they could operate from that property within a 7-day period, and that would allow them flexibility to have, they could have 2 classes on one day or possibly 1 class on one day, 1 class on another day, but it would give them a maximum and flexibility on when those classes would be held. But it would be 5 classes in total, not 5 yoga, 5 something else, 5 something else. It would be a maximum of 5 classes, but this is from the applicant's submission. In relation to class sizes, you are correct. That is what the applicant has their compromise to us in terms of when we've discussed impacts, in terms of you will note the 9 objections that we've received, and we've received those are from 9 individual properties. We've had a number of objections and multiple objections over the period, because what you will note is we granted PAM permission, I think in 2021. Not long after the completion of the building, we started getting enforcement complaints that the site was being used for a business purpose, which then instigated an enforcement case in November 2022. So that was then resulted in the enforcement investigation resulted in submission of this application. Over that time period and during this application, various negotiations have taken place in relation to address the concerns that have been raised by residents. Predominantly from their view that they do not believe that there are limited numbers of classes taking place and more than the applicant is suggesting that they are. But we haven't sat there every day and counted how many classes in operation, but there is public information available on this business, which operates currently from 2 sites, as you note from the report. So in terms of the class sizes, what the applicant is asking for today in the report is 16. And what we are suggesting is based on the concerns that we've had from the residents, including the objections that were raised via the enforcement case during the application, the temporary period and limiting the class sizes to 12 would be reasonable. So in terms of the hours then of the duration and the opening hours, again, that information on page 12 is what the applicant has put to us and what they wish to operate. Noting that if you look up public information that's available for this business, they operate on this site and a site within Neath, which has planning permission for such uses, and they also run a large number of classes from that property known as Bromley House.
Yeah, it's still a little bit, because the ward member now have come in and saying they've asked now for 20 cars. And
Not, excuse me,
up to
Chair,
20 cars.
not 20 cars, 20 persons per class.
Right, okay. So they would have to actually change that now, or we would have to allow the change on that, yeah?
I would suggest that if members were to go above and beyond what the applicant has set out within their submission and above what has been considered as part of the application, that they would be potentially any decision that would be made on anything above 16 would potentially put that decision at risk, because members of the public could consider that that has gone ultra vires beyond the limits of the application that's been provided. Right. Now, whilst there's been a number of discussions ongoing during the application process about the maximum number that would possibly be acceptable, and obviously what may be acceptable on a highway and pedestrian safety point of view, for example, may be very different what may be acceptable on a residential amenity point of view. So in terms of where we're coming from, in terms of the planning application, we're looking at all of the impacts that have been raised to us during the consultation process, which are from a number of different properties, and we're trying to provide a suitable compromise that would address both the needs of the applicant, but also the wider impacts on the community at large.
Just a second. Yeah. So has the applicant actually come to MPT to ask us to increase the classes, or has it just gone to the ward member?
This is the information that we have in writing from the agent, which sets out the letter that's been submitted in support of the application, that sets out various issues. So, for example, that correspondence states that they don't necessarily want a temporary consent, but in terms of what they've put forward for in terms of class numbers, sizes, duration of the classes and the opening hours, I'm pretty confident that what's set out on page 12 is the kind of latest view from the applicant of what they would ideally wish us to be looking for.
Okay, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Councillor Sarah Thomas?
Thank you. I've got two questions. My first one is sort of a bit linked to this. So in 2 years, you're saying this is a temporary thing. What happens in 2 years? Does it come back to planning before any further decision is made, or is that just going to get approved sort of automatically almost?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. No, the process would be, this is common with these type of uses, where you obviously we're trying to balance the needs of the applicant with the wider concerns. And what this does is give a period of time in which you would operate lawfully, because currently this site has been operating since basically the building was built, on various degrees, operating a commercial use without planning permission. So what this would do is give a period of time in which the authority can then assess the success or not of the proposal, whether they comply with the conditions that are proposed, and obviously to ascertain whether or not it's resulted from any unacceptable impacts. What would then happen is that rather than wait until the end of the 10 years, the 2 years, maybe after sort of 18 months, 20 months, the applicant will have to submit an application to vary that condition. So they would come in with a formal application to vary that condition, setting out what exactly they wish to change. So either they would either like to remove the temporary consent, or they could also link that with, to remove the temporary consent, to increase the numbers to 16 and to vary the hours of opening later. But obviously in terms of where we stand at the moment, the hours that are proposed and the class sizes would potentially result in up to 16 individual vehicles driving past properties at between 6 and 6:30 in the morning, which we consider at the moment is resulting in unacceptable impacts upon residential amenity. So that's why we've suggested the conditions proposed.
So obviously when that application comes in 18 months, 2 years time, members again will have the opportunity to potentially request that application to be called into committee the same as any other application.
Thank you. And my other question is really, so I remember in a recent meeting, we talked about settlement limits and how we're not allowed to approve planning permissions outside of them. Was that specifically because it was residential, or why is this different, basically?
Yeah, so the application was originally submitted as a outbuilding within the curtilage of a residential dwelling. It was at that time we did receive concerns and objections from neighbours that they believed that the use wouldn't be for residential use only. It was clarified by the applicant that that was their sole purpose. They wished to use it for their own use. But then obviously we received complaints that there was a business use operating from there, which is clear from information that's available publicly anyway. So in terms of outside of settlement limits in the Green Wedge, as the local members pointed out and said, there are policies that encourage rural diversification and other small forms of use. And I think as we've set out in the report, if this use was in a town centre or a centre with existing commercial development, we would unlikely put any restrictions based on class sizes or hours of operation beyond which, other commercial uses in that area are operating. But clearly what that policy allows for is small scale development that does not have a detrimental impact on the wider Green Wedge and countryside allocation or people's enjoyment of the countryside for its own benefits.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Matthew Crowley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wonder, Chris, if you could put up the settlement area of the little star that you had. Could you put that back, that slide back up, please? Thanks very much.
Yes, I've been done, Councillor. I should try my best. Once you've done it once, it doesn't like it anymore.
I'll be Christopher.
No, I'll just shut it down and start again.
Yeah, Matthew, okay?
Yeah,
So
could you, oh, sorry, go on, Chris.
yeah, so what that plan identifies is the yellow area is what's considered to be settlement limits. So within settlement limits, obviously you can build infill residential property. So there's policies in the plan that relate to development within inside settlement limits.
Yep.
So everything outside then is considered to be what's classed as open countryside. So if you look at the key at the side, what we've got toggled on that map is the Green Wedge policy, which is EN3. So that affords sort of another layer of protection in terms of the open countryside.
Okay. Can you put the next one on, which one actually showed the housing and the buildings, please, if you don't mind? Okay. That gives me a better picture of it, in fairness. I got a couple of observations, to be honest. Obviously, you've set out where we are, and it's my basic understanding in this is that the applicant has made certain requests. So we are putting conditions on the request. That's it in a nutshell, Chris, yeah?
That's correct, yes, Councillor.
Right, okay. In terms of the settlement limit there and outside there, I fully understand that it's sitting in countryside. However, there are buildings quite close to it that are in that countryside as well. I'd like to know, Chris, you've got lots of facts here to your disposal, which we haven't got. How many residents have complained about this particular business being operated? Are we talking ones and twos? because at the end of the day, this business has to be a viable concern for the business to operate. And if there's very minimal, objections, then surely we have to look at the best possible outcome for the people that have put the application in, and enable them to make a living from it. And the bit about the Bronley House, I'm not interested in any of that. I'm only interested in this application of where it is. So how many applicants have actually complained about this particular proposal, Chris?
As set out in the report, which obviously all members have been provided with, if you look at page 16 all the way through to page 18, that sets out, in response to date, 9 individual members of the public in multiple representations. The issues then are all summarised on the pages that I've set out. So in total, a number of 9 individual properties, but some of those properties have responded to us on multiple times on both the enforcement case that was ongoing because of the unlawful use that was taking place, and also submitted as part of this application. And all of those comments are set out within the reports on 16 to page 18.
Thank you for that. That's very useful in terms of the number. So we're really talking about 9 particular individuals that have complained about this particular application. It's not for me to point a finger over that ward. I mean, it's Bob Wolford, the Council Wolford is there this afternoon, and he'll make he's made his case on behalf of the applicant. It's where we go as a committee in terms of, the restrictions we are putting on for the 2-year period. It could come to a point of view of whereby, we put further restrictions on. It's not necessarily that after 2 years we take them off. If we have to encourage well-being as part of our corporate plans. We have to encourage employment, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not disagreeing with residents having the right, to disagree with the application. That's part of the process. But I mean, we have to take into context the numbers involved here. And for me, I don't think 9 individuals living that far away from the plan that you just showed me, I mean, it's again, I'm going back to, where we've been in the past. I can't make it out, if I'm honest. It's not for me to make the decision. It's down for the committee. But, at the end of the day, it's, we have to look at the bigger picture once more. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Can Chris come back? Go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Councillor Gray, just to clarify, in terms of the concerns raised, obviously those are concerns raised by residents, but notwithstanding whether or not we have 1 objection or 1,000 objections, doesn't set out whether something is acceptable in planning terms. So we can have something that's completely unacceptable in terms of planning policy and impacts, and receive no objections whatsoever. So in terms of the objections that have been raised, it's the nature of the concerns that have been raised. And us trying to find an appropriate balance between allowing something to happen, but addressing the impacts of that development upon those properties that are affected. So something can affect 1 individual property and still justify a recommendation of refusal being put forward. So in terms of viability, which has been mentioned a couple of times, it's just to clarify, if someone wants to operate a business, then the viability of that business is purely a matter for them to consider about whether it's a viable option to go forward. But the business itself advertises similar uses in 2 different sites. This is just one of them, and the other one is at Bronley House, which is relevant to the discussion, as in it is not the only site that this business operates from. But in terms of whether or not they consider it viable going forward, it's a private matter for them, just as competition is not an issue in terms of planning. If someone wants to open another coffee shop in Neath Town Centre, for example, then they have to take account of they are in the competition with others. But in terms of the objections, just to be clear, it is not purely a numbers game about if you get a lot of objections, something gets refused.
Okay, Matthew.
Thank you for that clarification, Chris. I get it. I understand fully what you're saying. But as I keep always saying, there's a bigger picture at hand. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor Crowley. Councillor Gareth Rice. Oh, sorry, apologies. Councillor Heath Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be
Sorry.
making it short and brief. I know the area. On the council's remark regarding the parking side, obviously a lot of these people, or some of them, I think will be local people, perhaps in Neath, Ross or whatever. Some will walk there. And you've got then the Machawel area, you've got Neath area, that people can park their cars so they can walk down there. So what I'm trying to say is not everybody will take their cars. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But there are certain areas where they can park their cars and walk in. And it's a nice walk. That's my point of view on that anyway. And depending on the weather. So, Chair, I just want to put that across, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Heath. Councillor Rosalind Davis, please.
Diolch yn fawr, thank you. Has the business been in operation at Cletir Gove since the planning enforcement notice?
Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, there is no planning enforcement notice that's been served. We have an enforcement case that came in, I believe, in November 2022, following development that was granted for the use of it as private business. There was lots of discussions with the applicant in relation to that use, in terms of the level of activity that would be there that we would consider to be a business use over and above that would be associated with a residential property, which obviously resulted in this application. But in terms of the complaints that we've received from members of the public and information that we've seen since the submissions application, the commercial use of this property has been ongoing within that time.
Diolch yn fawr, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Carl Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. My question, Chair, is for Chris. If Chris can put the map back up for us, please, of the area, please. Not the one that's been coloured out. Yeah, this one. You haven't got a larger picture of that there, Chris, are we?
No, not to hand, Chair.
Just a question, just to the left of the star, just to the bottom side of the picture, middle of the picture there. That's Rosemeadow Garage there. Can I ask a question? If the fields from Rosemeadow Garage back to the Rose sort of corner, Rose School, hasn't that been allocated as part of the area's RLDP to have houses built on that section of field there for fronting on to Pontdowie Road?
Obviously, as you're aware, the RLDP is going through a process, but in terms of any consideration under this plan, all we can look at are the policies within your existing plan until such time and that new plan is adopted. I can probably have a look at the RLDP to see the allocation, but until such time as that allocation is confirmed, it has no weight in relation to that.
Chris, I don't believe it has.
Okay, the local member does not believe that area is within that allocation.
Okay, my sort of concerns would be if the person's up to the right hand side of it, or straight directly head north of the star that's in the centre of the screen there, they're going to be in the middle of a two sort of pronged attack there. If not the wrong word to say two pronged attack, but it's outside the development as such by a couple of 100 meters, I suppose. But then you're going to have a development plan which is going to be below it. So it's either inside or it's outside the existing build area.
Yeah, I mean, as I pointed out, and probably will, as the RLDP will go forward, and I believe there's a all members seminar session on the RLDP fairly soon. But obviously that information is all, as we pointed out previously, the old way of dealing with local development plans were they gained weight as you went through the process. So some of these things start to take account. So some of the policies, some of the allocations and the background evidence. Under this process, while some of the background evidence may be of interest and use for us in development management, the actual policies and the plan and the new allocations do not come into force until such time as we receive the inspector's indication that we can adopt the plan.
Yeah, I think that's the key point, Chair, is that it's only upon receipt of the inspector's report, which will have binding recommendations, that any weight can start to apply to the emerging new plan. So as Chris has quite rightly outlined, any application that planning committee members are considering now, whether it be this one or indeed anything else that comes forward, has to be judged and assessed against the current existing development plan.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Chris. Carl, are you happy?
Yeah, happy with the responses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Carl. There we are. Got you, no, Gareth. Sorry about that earlier, but it was yours.
Thank you. I was going to say I wasn't sure where this was until Carl pointed out that's the garage. It makes sense now where it is. Just to touch on what was said earlier about 9 properties being a small number of objectors, I think, as quite rightly said, if it's one person, an objection is an objection, and people will still feel quite strongly. And to 9 people on what looks like quite a small settlement in their area, it's quite a lot of people actually for the ratio of that small area. And I'd be surprised if one wasn't. I don't know who they are, but the bungalow on the corner, number 4 Cumnant Lloyd Road, I'd be surprised if they are not one's objection, because they're not on the entrance. But my question really is, where are we with regards to the enforcement against the illegal use of the commercial use of that building?
Okay, so good question, Chris.
So we received a planning application. You will note from the report that during that application, changes occurred also. So it was a bit of a moving feast in terms of trying to pin down exactly what the applicants were wishing to achieve and what matters we needed to consider. You will note that there's some works to the access because of the numbers that the applicant was looking at trying to provide. Obviously, our highways colleagues suggested some changes to the access arrangements to increase visibility there, because obviously if you've got 12 individual people driving there for the first time, they may not be au fait with the lane, which is also a public right of way. So obviously they wanted to ensure that visibility was there, because there's not many passing bays on the lane, so you're going to have people visiting there for the first time, and obviously they want to make that safer. They needed to increase visibility. So during the application again, we received further complaints about tree felling, which we're also addressing in the report, and obviously we then have to address that within the application. So there's been a number of times when we've got to go back out to reconsultation. So the issue that we have today is that we think with the conditions that we've got imposed here to restrict the use both for 2 years, limit the numbers and the hours of operation, we think are reasonable to allow for what the applicant wishes to try and achieve there, and to be undertaken in a lawful way within the remit of those conditions and limit of those. Obviously, as we've already discussed, that would give everyone the opportunity to sort of test the water to see if one, this is a viable business going forward, and secondly, if it can operate in a rural location without having unacceptable impacts on the adjoining properties. And as you pointed out, Councillor Rice, one of the objectors is obviously from that property on the corner, because currently there would not be a reason why you would have a number of vehicles driving up and down that lane at 6:30 in the morning, unless there was a destination to go to. So clearly we're trying to balance those impacts and the applicant's needs. So we're trying to balance the individual needs of that applicant with the wider concerns from the community. We think that the set of conditions and the requirement for the tree planting as compensation for the loss of the trees sort of provides the right and appropriate balance at this time. And obviously, should the applicant in the future come in to look at extending those, any issues or concerns that have been raised within that 2-year period can be reconsidered and assessed. Obviously, that may put work on officers, because obviously as enforcement officers, we may have to go out there and check to make sure that they are operating the limits of the conditions. But that is the process. The alternative would be is that we'd be sitting here with a recommendation of refusal, and we would potentially be seeking enforcement action, authorization for enforcement action for the cessation of the use completely, and also potentially addressing issues regarding the trees that we plant.
Okay. I specifically was trying to get information on the enforcement that's in place. I'm presuming that it's not quite clear in the report. Have we enforced them against using it for commercial premises at all? In other words, stop using it as commercial, and they're still doing it?
No, we haven't issued any formal notice at this time. And obviously, depending on the outcome of this application, they either get planning permission, or potentially, if it was refused, we would be seeking action to authorise to take enforcement action against stopping the use. I think during the conversation, and the case officer will nod at me if I'm incorrect, I think the applicant's agent has advised them to try and limit the use of the outbuilding in the interim to a level that is what they would consider ancillary to the use of the dwelling. So uses can operate from residential properties without planning permission. So lots of people operate businesses like financial businesses, or we had quite a complicated case regarding someone who gave guitar lessons, for example. So that you can operate some form of small businesses from a residential property where we would consider that would be still ancillary to the use of the main dwelling. But our view is that the level that the applicant is wishing to provide does require planning permission.
But in this specific case, it specifically says they were not to use it as commercial when it was built, with it.
Yes, so they've been in breach of that condition since that time that they've had plans, and still since the time it's been constructed. Yes.
And how long has that been going for?
I believe the enforcement case was submitted in November 2022. We had the first enforcement case on it.
So 3 and a bit years they've been operating, floating the conditions then, really, 3 years.
Yeah, since that time, and we're not aware that the commercial use has ceased totally.
All right. Okay, thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Gareth. Councillor Crowley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I may, Chair, can I ask Councillor Wolford, the local member? Obviously, this application is for approval, Bob. So, what's your view in terms of, obviously, you're there to support the applicant? Can you give us a few lines on what's your view, please?
Well,
Chair?
Yes, Bob. You are allowed to say later.
Well, to answer Gareth's question as well, Matthew, I first got involved in this actually from the other side because of resident came to me regarding it being used for a commercial use on whatever level, and that couldn't be probably proved to the extent either way. And I had to go to the planning department and ask, how is this happening? Because I didn't understand it. As a new councillor, I didn't understand how a business could operate and whatever. And then it was explained by Chris and Rodri to myself exactly how that worked, and that the planning was being put in place so that they have the power to use enforcement if necessary. On a personal basis, I've lived in the area for 35 years. I've, as far as this is concerned, only engaged with one objector. I have none of the other objectors have engaged with me at all since I've been a councillor there. So I don't actually know who they are. And I visited the site and I've engaged with the applicants. That was quite late on in the process because they hadn't actually engaged with me at all. But then I had contact from them to engage. I visited the site. The site is extremely calm. Within the limits of their property, there are no audible or visual kind of impacts from the actual building where it is to anything. The only impact would be vehicle impact, which I can quite understand. And as you stated, Gareth, that corner bungalow, I believe, is the main objector. And yes, if I lived in that bungalow, I would be concerned on what vehicle traffic would be going past. However, the applicants have tarmacked the area and will comply with any widening or whatever that's needed there. And I just feel that the temporary planning and allowing the business to operate properly, although Chris has said that doesn't come into the planning thing, it obviously has to come into my mind as a local member, that if there is a business in my ward that needs to thrive and go ahead, it needs to be given that opportunity. And so with the temporary planning and the amendments that I've suggested today, I feel that we can go ahead and, as Chris said, it doesn't have to be 2 years. If it's 12 months down the line and there's a problem, perhaps we can go back in and then talk to them. But I think the opportunity needs to be given to this business to thrive in the first place.
Thank you, Bob. Yes, Chris, also.
Just to clarify, whatever is given, should planning permission be granted today, with the limits that either suggested within this report or any amendments, that is what they would be lawfully allowed to operate for 2 years. If a problem occurred within the first year, we would have no opportunity to come back to them and say, sorry, we've changed our mind. We know we said 6:30, but now we're going to change you to 8:30. What the controls that we're suggesting put in place is that would limit it in terms of the hours of operation, and the changes that we're making to what the applicant is suggesting is we're moving it from 6:30 to 8:30 because we do not think it's reasonable to allow people between 6:30 and 8:30 to enjoy the benefit of their property without having the number of vehicles that could be driving past them along that lane, to a use that people would have no other reason to be driving up and down that lane in that time of the morning. But to be clear, we would not have opportunity to go back and say this isn't working for us, can we change them? That would only be the applicant, in the applicant's benefit, to come back after, within the end, near the end of that 2 year period, and say, we've operated, can we now increase the numbers, or can we look at opening hours? And at that time, we may say, okay, well, 7:30 might be reasonable, and 16 people might be reasonable. So and perhaps we can remove a temporary permission on the basis of that operation. But obviously, members need to be aware whatever is given planning permission will be the limit, and we will have no enforcement powers to take action unless they're not complying with the limits that we're setting within that.
Thank you, Chris.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, you are? Yes, sorry.
So, sorry, if I might just come in and say a couple of things, if that's all right, Mr. Chair. Just a question to Chris, if I may, picking up on the point that the Vice Chair had made. Chris, on page 12, we have, don't we, the specifications of the applicant. That includes the 5 classes, but the maximum class size of 12, are you confident that that is a correct reflection of what the applicant has said?
In terms of what's on page 12 sets out what the applicant is suggesting that they can live with. So what they would be acceptable.
It says 16.
16.
It is 16.
And in page 26 is what sets out on what we are proposing under the conditions, which is restricting then the classes down to 12.
That's right.
So what's set out on page 12, which is confusing because there's too many 12s here. But what we're setting out on page 12 is in discussions with the applicant during the application process, provided by their agent, stating that this is ideally what we would like. That might have started at a higher number previously, and there might have been various other things. But in terms of the general direction of travel, that is what we think the applicants are proposing and would like to be considered in this application. We think balancing that with the views of the concerns that we've had from residents is what we then set out within the conditions and on page 29, which is that we think the two main changes are the class sizes and operating between 6:30 and 8:30 in the morning.
So members, what you have here is 3 points, isn't it? You have the officer recommendation, that you have to take account of, you have to have due regard to in making any determination that you're inclined to make. You have the applicant's position where they say 16, please, with 6:30 to 8:30. Then you have the position of the local ward member, which takes that number to 20. I think that the local ward member has agreed with the two-year review period, and also so you support the hours of 6:30 to 8:30. Given what you've heard from, you need, of course, to take into account the representations made by the local ward member. That is quite correct. But you are also guided by the advice provided by your planning officer. And he has come to the view that he has in respect to this report, that in order to balance all the appropriate planning conditions, in his view, the limit would be a limit of 12 with the hours as prescribed. So I think that is the decision, members, that you need to take here. You have the recommendation made at the conclusion of the report with the conditions which come attached. It's the officer's recommendation that this application is approved, but it is subject to conditions. So I would suggest in making your determination, you consider the officer recommendation first.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
Chair, could I just to clarify the numbers, obviously, because we have 3 sets of numbers now. So the recommendation shows 12.
Yes.
Page 12 of the report shows 16. My number of 20 has come from conferring with the applicants, doing a site visit and seeing the capacity of the building that the planning recommendation is going forward. So that capacity being, as I've said, 20 plus. So that's where I've come in after speaking to the applicants recently with that number, because I don't want confusion. And the fact is, yeah, I did speak to them, and it, you know, perhaps their 16 was a kind of a, not a barter, but an in between the 12 that was being proposed and the 20 of the capacity of the building. And so that's why I come with that number. I just don't want those 3 numbers to confuse people.
And just to clarify, the capacity of building is not necessarily the issue. Is the issue here?
No. I take that into consideration.
Yeah,
but
it's
you know,
the impacts in terms of numbers that we're talking about, in terms of additional traffic, noise and disturbance from the coming and going from the use, that we're saying the numbers combined with the early hour of operation at 6:30, where you've got people travelling up and down the lane that would necessarily have no reason to go there apart from going to a commercial business, what they would normally consider to be an area that is rural and residential. So that is why we think those conditions are reasonable. The only other point I just wanted to make members aware of is, obviously, we're talking about if plan permission is granted today, they have to wait 2 years. They don't have to wait 2 years. They can submit an application to vary those conditions tomorrow. They can also appeal those decisions to those conditions to Welsh Government. So they can submit an application to vary the conditions, or they can appeal the decision that we've made, considering that they think our conditions are unreasonable. Obviously, Welsh Government can have a completely different view and think that the whole thing is unacceptable and take the whole thing away from them. But obviously, the 2 years is what we're setting as a temporary permission. It gives them enough time to have some surety they can operate within the confines of the conditions we're proposing. But that doesn't mean they've got to wait 2 years to come in with a variation. They could operate for 12 months and then say, well, you know, now we want to change and use our evidence to show why we think it's acceptable.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Bob. You'll have a chance to sum up the book.
Yeah.
Right, okay. In the room, Councillor Tim Bowen.
Yeah, can I ask Mike for some advice on this? In the pack it says 16, ward members saying 20. What would be the implications on members if we went with the 20 to what's actually in the pack? Would there be any implications back on ourselves?
I would say, sir, that's clear blue water between what is being recommended by the officer. At the end of the day, the recommendation is advice, but you need to have regard to that advice. And he has arrived at the view that he has, given taking into account policy considerations, representations made all across the board as well. Your starting point, in my view, and my advice would be the recommendation of 12 people with the hours. If you choose otherwise, you'll need to have justifiable planning reasons for doing so.
Thank you. And in the room again,
Can I just add to that point? I mean, I think we always make the point, don't we, to members of the planning committee that we have to assess the applications before us. Now, the application before us is for 16, not 20. So I think it's probably worth making that much.
Okay, thank you. There we are. Councillor Sarah Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'm ready to make a proposal if we're ready for that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Shall I make the proposal?
Yes,
or does the ward member want to sum up first?
What is it?
Yeah,
No, sorry, Bob. There's another person who needs to speak as well, Sarah.
No.
Oh, okay. I just asked for Gareth. Do you want to say anything?
No, it was absolute clarity on the figures. It was about 20 because it wasn't on the application, and to make sure when it goes to vote, what we are voting on is 12 on 16 and not the 20. That's not mentioned anywhere other than what Bob has said today. So you've cleared that up for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. So now then, Sarah, we'll wait now for the ward member to sum up and we come to you. Thank you. Bob?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I can only reiterate what I said before, that I do understand the importance of the community impact, but as a ward member, I also have a duty really to support businesses and enterprises within my ward and within the borough. I apologise for the confusion between the 20, the 16 and the 12. I am here, and this has been called into committee because the applicants spoke to me at length, and I did the site visit. And I don't know whether Chris can confirm or deny that maybe originally they went for 20 and then it was a kind of a back down. So that's where that number came to with me. I think any vehicle traffic in an area that hasn't been used to it is going to have some impact. I think that it's reasonable to say that if we went to 16, it's reasonable to say that there's a distinct possibility that 16 individuals wouldn't come in their vehicles, although there's parking on site for at least 16, if not more people. And that maybe if classes were regular, that those people would travel together in cars anyway, and it would reduce the vehicle traffic going past. I can only ask that you consider everything that's been said today and propose the amendments that I've suggested, or if necessary at the level of 16, if that's what you feel is a better option, to give this business an opportunity to be a viable business within my ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wolford. Back to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So I propose that we approve the officer recommendation with the conditions. I think the officers have given this due regard and considered all sides in this, and I think that it's fair. It is only for a 2-year period, and as the officer has said, they can put in to change that within that 2-year period. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Have you got a seconder?
I'll second that, Chair. Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, thank you, Rosa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so if we start with councillor Aubrey, please, if we can make a vote on that, please.
Yes, I support the officer's recommendation.
Yes.
Councillor Bowen, please.
Yeah, I'm against that proposal.
Okay, councillor Matthew Crowley, please.
I'm torn between a rock and a hard place, but I think I will vote with officers on this one. Thanks very much.
Councillor Heath Davies, please.
Yes, I vote with the officer's decision. It's yes for me.
Yes.
Yes.
Councillor Rosalind Davis, I know you had connection issues earlier. Have you been prepared? Do you feel like you've had enough information?
Yes, it was only for a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
And I vote with the officer's recommendation. Diolch.
Okay, thank you. Councillor James Henton, please. Being present for the whole item and how do you wish to vote?
Yeah, present and support.
Thank you. Councillor Jeff Jones, please.
Yes, I've been present and I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Carl Jordan, please.
Present and vote against this recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Gareth Rice, please.
Present and support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Thomas, please.
I've been present throughout and I support the officer recommendation.
Okay, so that recommendation's been approved.
Okay, thank you. We move to officer, is it? No,
No, instead, then,
okay. Agenda item 6, application P2025-0622, land at Pearson Way, Neath. As previously mentioned, this application has been withdrawn from consideration at today's meeting at the request of the applicants. Now we move on to section B of the agenda, which is matters for information. Agenda items 7 and 8 detail the appeals determined and delegated decisions from the time frame indicated in the circulated report. As chair, I can confirm that we note the information contained within these reports. We have no urgent items today. There are
just to interrupt, just to clarify in terms of that item that's been withdrawn.
Sorry, Chris.
So the applicants have submitted amended plans. Those plans have gone out to consultation. As part of that consultation exercise, the local members will again be contacted to ask them for their views on the amended proposals. So you'd have seen that report already, and you will note that it was to turn 2 4-bedroom houses into 3 flats each. The amendments are reducing them down to 2 flats within each unit. But local members will be contacted again to ask, has that addressed their concerns and do they wish the application to come to committee? If that is the case, it will be at the next committee in March. If they then determine that they are happy with the amended proposals, then those applications be determined by delegated panel. So we'll probably just feed back to you following committee should that item not come before you in at the next committee. So we'll put it on the agenda as a note for next time.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And I see that Councillor Gareth Wright has his hand up. So Gareth.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to come back. Clarity on agenda item 7, Bethel Street, the appeal. What does that actually mean? What's actually happened there?
So the applicants appealed that decision. That recommendation was one. We made a recommendation of refusal based on highway grounds. That application was successful, so they won that appeal. But basically, they've got planning permission now for a HMO in that area because the inspector disagreed with our view on highway grounds. And just for members to be aware as well, is we've also had confirmation now that the appeal has been submitted to PEDU on relation to the Ena Avenue HMO, which was overturned from officer recommendation at one of the previous committees a few months ago. So that's now gone to appeal. So we'll obviously notify you of the outcome of that one as well in the usual way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Gareth.
We'll share that decision with you, Councillor. We'll make sure you've got a copy of it so you can have a read through.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. Councillor Sarah Thomas, please.
Thank you. It was about the HMO appeal. So I assume that you might want someone from planning to be involved in that. Have you got someone or?
We're yet to, we know that it's been submitted. So what we do is we get a confirmation from Pempedu that they've received it, and it basically says we will assess your application and consider whether it's valid. Then we will get a start date, and we will know then what format that will take. So it will either be representations, which means that we just write the statement. In relation to this one, obviously we would normally go, here's our officer report, but obviously the officer report was one of approval. So we will have to find out what format that would take. Would it be a hearing? Will it be written reps? If it's written reps, we will obviously see if an officer within the department is happy to write that statement. And we will let members of the planning committee know when that's been undertaken. And obviously we can probably have a chat about logistics in terms of, do members of the planning committee want to see that draft report before it goes, noting there are very tight timelines in relation to get some of this stuff out. There's a quick turnaround if it is written reps, but we will keep you in the loop on that.
Thank you. Should you need any assistance on that, I would be happy to. I know it was me that came up with the proposal on that one. Yeah. So, all right.
No
thank
problem.
you.
We'll make sure that all members kept in the loop on that one, so they know progress on it.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Sarah. No more questions? No, there we are. Okay. So that's the end of the items today. So that's the end of business, and thank you all for attending. Meeting's over. Thank you.
Thanks all. Diolch pawb.
Yeah.